Conscious Curiosity, a collection of recorded conversations in which childlike wonder meets the deep mysteries of life. Hosted by Indigo Bruno and the Star Child. Welcome back to Conscious Curiosity. We're very, very happy that you've tuned in for this episode. In this one, we talk about the very big question of who God is or what God is, the different belief systems that one may have about God, and how we personally found God as well. And in the end, we even talk about something that I guess in this whole conversation goes a bit under, which is atheism. So this is a very much a different episode how we usually done. We go more in depth about one specific subject, which is the subject of all things, God, the source. There are many names. Nothing can really describe it, although we try our best. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, share it with your friends if you like it. I wanted to record this because it doesn't necessarily fit into the subject. However, it kind of goes into the direction of it, right? Because I think oftentimes when we speak about finding God, right, it's about finding yourself. At least I kind of believe that there is a essence of God within all of us. And for me, this kind of really came out with all of its facets, be it more of the shadow and the light on this road trip. So for the past week, I've driven down Europe by myself in this new van, and it was an adventure in many different ways, from freezing cold temperatures. I do not have a heater in this van. To yeah, you can say that out loud, man. It was crazy, and then even the engine light turned on, and I was like in the middle of France. It was minus degrees, and I was just like, oh, so moments like that. And then also, driving through Madrid in a big van, that was an experience I could have not had. That was very stressful. Man, that was too much.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, being here now, or this whole journey, it tells you so much about yourself if you do something that's a bit out of your comfort zone and brings you to new places and new situations, and life rewards you for that as well. There was in a small Spanish village that I just found completely by accident. There was a medieval fair going on, and I enjoyed myself so much. Just I don't really speak Spanish all that well, so I couldn't really talk to that many people. Just the vibe of the place, all the children playing, all the villagers interacting with one another, being dressed up as knights and everything. It was
That's so
so
cool.
sweet. It was so
Yeah.
sweet. And I think that just goes to show that in life, there's always an adventure that's waiting for us. And that adventure always takes place within and without. And that's the important part. And I guess that's one of the biggest realizations that I've had, or when we speak about the way that I found to God or spirituality, I would say for me, it was that these outer discoveries of ancient history, of ancient places, of looking into these things and then traveling to a lot of places myself, how that made me feel is the way that I found to God, because there is something happening within us on this road of discovery. Whatever it is that you're discovering, whether that is philosophy, history, or whatever your channel or passion is, it is always a journey, a creative act, if you will. And what that does to us internally, I think, is very well the same path that leads one to God eventually.
In what way would you say you found God, I guess, through that internal journey? Like, is it just like a general sort of sense that you're on the right path and there's something out there that's, pointing the way almost? Or in what sense would you say that journey sort of led you to God or to spirituality? Like, what do you mean when you say God and spirituality in that context?
I think what I really describe it as is the awe and the nuance of everything. right? I had this moment, to keep it in my road trip. I had this moment where I drove over the Pyrenees, which is a big mountain range that borders France and Spain. And I was kind of scared to drive over that mountain range because I didn't know how high the roads go. I don't have snow tires, so if it snows, I'm kind of screwed. So there was a lot of pressure in that, and it turned out to be one of the most beautiful drives of my life, with all the mountain views and everything that was there. And there
Mm.
was a moment where I saw a hitchhiker on the side of the road. I couldn't take her in because I was already past her. I just saw her standing there with a backpack. And in that moment, it was kind of a deep realization, as those come, I think, in a flash, where just there's a moment of clarity amidst all the happenings, where I was like, wow, life is so nuanced. She has a very own story. She's on her own adventure. Why
Mm.
she's there on this parking lot somewhere in the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And I think what that means to me is to feel that sensation of awe and something that's way more powerful and higher than our very selves, and that there's more to life than just our own version of it. That
That's
it is way
beautiful.
too complex to be anything random. It's a miracle. And these moments of discovery that feel like a miraculous sensation, those are the moments that I feel closest to source, or to feel alive. Because I think at the end of
Mm.
the day, we use a lot of different words to describe the same thing.
I love that. I think, yeah, that really gets to the core, at least, of what I think would be like the religious sort of experience, where you really feel a sort of sense of mystery and awe for existence in the universe, and you just marvel at it, and you think there has to be something else because it's so incredible. I mean, the way everything is structured and seems almost designed, and the happenings even in our own lives when we meet certain people and it feels like they were meant to be there in that time at that place. And it does feel like there's something else going on that's just helping all that sort of manifest or come through. But I guess talking more about just the whole idea about God, I think it'd be good to break down. You know me, I'm like very intellectual, philosophical, and I like to study it from usually the point of view of philosophy, which really breaks down all the different quote unquote views about God into specific names, and it lists what each one of those actually means. So you kind of have a big picture view about what do we actually mean when we say God, and when different people say God in different contexts. So I think breaking that down would probably be just breaking down the different views of God that I've stumbled upon. And in philosophy, there's generally, I mean, there's so many, but I think there's like the classification of the ones. The first one would be the one I think a lot of people know is theism, which is kind of the god of the monotheistic God of the, Judaism, Islam, all those sort of traditions, which is it's almost like a supernatural mind. Like it has a lot of the similar attributes that we have, which is it knows, and it's like all loving and it's all good. So it's like, and it's an agent almost with all these sort of human attributes, but they're like almost supernatural because they're like expanded to the ultimate version of what they can be. So like it has all knowledge, and it's perfectly good instead of just good, and it's all that sort of stuff that usually people attribute to the theistic God. But obviously it's sometimes hard because I think it can be very nuanced. Like different people also have very specific views on God that might differentiate themselves from that one theistic sort of view in the religions of Judaism and Islam and Christianity. But I think that's a general picture of what it would be. And then there's like more other views like deism. Generally, also, I forgot to mention that theism, I think the main thing with that is that it sees God as something transcendent from the universe. Like it's not not always here right now, but it's apart from it. Whereas a lot of the other ones see it as something that's immanent in the universe. It exists within here and in reality. So, for example, one of them that I really like is pantheism, which I did a whole deep dive on pretty recently. And it's generally thought of as the whole idea that God is everything and everything is God, or that God is the universe rather than something distinct from it, like in theism. But when I started going down the rabbit hole, because when I came upon that belief, it was through like New Age spirituality. I don't know if you ever read the Kabbalion.
Not yet. It has been on the list. Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's at least to get into like if you want to understand like the core New Age, quote unquote, New Age spiritual beliefs that a lot of people in the New Age community kind of resonate with, that pretty much like lists them all in like a 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of format. But I mean, they're the principles of supposedly the Kabbalion. But yeah, one of them kind of talked about, it said like God is the all and God is mind. And that was like the first instance that I stumbled upon the whole idea of pantheism. I didn't really even know the term pantheism because I got into that later on when I actually studied it in philosophy. But yeah, it's kind of the whole idea that God is the all, but this all is also one, or it's unified in a very unique way. So it's not just like taking everything that exists and calling that God. It's that everything that exists is one in a very significant way. It could be it has one source, or it could be that it's made out of one stuff, which is one substance, sort of pantheism. It could be that it has like one purpose, the all, it has one purpose. Or, I mean, there's so many different ones, but I feel like for me personally, it was so valuable seeing that distinction that it's not just like a New Age spiritual fluff sort of belief that says, oh yeah, God is the all and it's one. It has very deep roots in the history of philosophy, and a lot of people have tried to break down what it actually means. But yeah, I mean, we can go down to all the different classifications of that one if you want. But yeah, generally, we've gone over so far like the theism one, pantheism, that God is the all, that is one, according to either substance or different things. And then there's panentheism, which is, I think it's good to also look at the etymology. I don't know remember when we always say that the first thing we should do is look at the etymology of the word when trying to understand it.
Yeah.
So I think panentheism, well, firstly, theism, I think in Greek or Latin, whatever it was, just means God. And pan usually just means all. So for pantheism, it's pretty much saying all God. But for panentheism, there's a pan, P-A-N, then an E-N, and then a theism, which is N, I think in Latin or Greek, it meant in. So it's saying all in God. And that view essentially says that, yeah, God is everything. Yes, so it affirms the pantheistic worldview, but it also says God transcends the universe or everything. Like everything is just a part of God, and there's a part of God that's also separate from everything. That's not touched by, I guess, the world and material reality and all that. So those are, I guess, the three big ones. There's more nuanced views within there, but yeah, like polytheism also says like, oh, there's a bunch of different gods, but yeah.
So that would be
that
would be the Hindu belief, the polytheism.
Polytheism, I think, yeah, polytheism would be Hindu, but they also have some. I forget what the name is, but there's
Brahman.
The view. Yeah, they also have the one Brahman because they do have many different deities, but they have the idea that there's one sort of ultimate God or deity or ultimate reality, that all the other gods are like just aspects trying to express the attributes of that one ultimate reality or God. And the God at least in Hinduism, specifically in the tradition known as Advaita Vedanta, it's very impersonal. It's like it's like a pure sort of consciousness that is also it has pantheistic sort of connotations to it, because a lot of the Hindu people believe in Advaita Vedanta believe that Brahman is the substance of everything, like literally everything in reality. This water bottle and me and you and the cells and atoms of which we're made of are made out of that pure consciousness, which they call Brahman or God. But yeah,
All right.
they have a polytheism, but I forget what it's called.
They just tossed everything together. The Hindus just said, "Yeah, we
Yeah.
believe in it all." I mean, look, it's just like, nah, whatever
Yeah, a bit of
theism
everything.
you got, we got it too.
That is true though, because I feel like they also have like the theism where they see God as a very personal thing. Like when there's certain Hindu people that believe in like Krishna or like the like sort of blue skinned deity as like the perfect representation of God that almost is God for them. Like they literally worship that almost as people in Christianity worship the idol of Jesus, and they have a form for Jesus, for God, in the shape of Jesus. So it is crazy. They really said, "Yep,
Yeah.
chef, I'll take the whole menu." But make
Yeah, just I really just had an all-you-can-eat buffet over there.
yeah,
It's also crazy because I also know that they have a very high opinion of their priests or monks that they learn from, that they are also seen as avatars of these gods, so that they
oh
are
wow,
naturally like humans that have God in them on a very deeper level. So it's
oh
like
that's crazy. I didn't know that.
they just got the whole thing cooking. Yeah, I was in a spiritual community and they had that where the whole philosophy of it was Hindu influenced. However, what was prayed to, what was at the altar was a picture of their guru, of their Baba,
Mhm. Oh
of
yeah,
their priest. And it's fascinating to kind of also see that spiral into these personifications of God in regular human form, which I guess Christians have done too,
yeah,
with
for
all of
sure.
these saints, and even the Pope is still thought to be selected by God or have this God connection that regular people don't have to that extent. So it is interesting to kind of see how the same concepts of religion or how one connects to God can also be found universally throughout
Yeah,
different religions.
yeah, for sure. And I feel like there's some truth to that too, where you can find God through a sort of guru or even through, an I guess Jesus, because they really embody, I guess, a lot of the attributes that maybe some people would uh would attribute to God, like a sense of just maybe like if Jesus just like walked up right here and was here right now, I'm sure we would all just feel like, or even Buddha or anyone like that, like a typical religious figure that's well known and it's very influential. They have an internal state of consciousness that's, I think, so different from what other people usually experience and live in, where they're like completely selfless, or in the sense of completely caring about others, not about themselves, but also, I guess, for Buddha, realizing there is no self. But yeah, and or like a sense of just love, like a very deep sense of love, which uh when you study like the mystical traditions of the religions and the experiences that they have about God, uh not even like the theistic sort of interpretations of it, but like the pantheistic ones, where God is like the all. It's usually described in the mystical traditions and even like past life regression sessions of like Dolores Cannon, and sometimes like psychedelic experiences, as like being immersed in like a sea of loving light energy where you just feel so blissful and at one with all things. And there's a sense of just pure love that emerges from that I think these gurus or even Jesus as a figure that may have existed could have like embodied in their state, where they like really reflect that state of consciousness of almost like also just being. I don't know. We've talked about that in another podcast where I think where we see that things just are, but this is also another sense of it where there's a very deep sense of stillness that you can embody, which reflects that sort of loving presence.
Mhm.
It's hard to talk about in words, like conceptually, because I don't know. Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about the stillness thing, but yeah, I feel like those figures, like the gurus and Jesus, would probably embody that very well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Have you ever met someone that has really given you that feeling of connection to God in such a way that it felt like it was a higher state of consciousness?
let me think. I don't think I have like met any sort of gurus or anyone like that, but I honestly think we can find that as well through like anyone or anything, like ordinary objects or looking at someone else in the eyes and really tuning into the stillness, like completely letting go of thoughts and just being completely immersed in, I guess, the now. And then there's like, I don't know what it is. It's like so hard to describe when you experience it, but there's some sense of like if you sit now and just put like a water bottle in front of you or like a tree, or you just stare at it for a while and trying to shut down thoughts, there's like a sense of pulsating aliveness that's like reflected in everything. That is what I think gurus and probably Jesus would embody, which I think is something that you can not only find in them, but literally in everything. If you just reach that state of consciousness yourself by like quieting the mind and trying to tap into stillness and presence, where I don't know, it's like so hard to put into words, but like it's like a sense of just being, and it's so peaceful, and things almost seem to like reflect that. And it like it's so thick that it feels like you can like literally cut it with a knife when you look out into the world. It's weird to describe, but I haven't personally found it through any specific like individual, but just through ordinary things in general when I quiet my mind. Have you met anyone that reflected any sort of spirituality back to you in a very profound sense?
Well, first of all, I love that answer that you gave. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. It kind of goes back also to that inner outer thing in a way, I feel like, right? Where you
Yeah.
have these inner realizations out of the outside moments. I guess
Nice.
I mean, I would in general say sometimes if you have eye contact with someone, that it's, you know, that
Yeah, the
feeling
eyes.
that's still, it's ungraspable, yet there is
Yeah.
something in that where it is, you know, the eyes of the soul in a way. You can
Yeah.
see
They
a
say the
lot
eyes
in
are
someone
windows to
else's
the
eyes.
soul. Yeah. Yeah.
It,
There's so much presence that you can feel through the eyes of. I feel like that's one of the ones I've felt it through the most. Like looking at the eyes of a cat and just sitting there for a while, and then zoom. It's like the sense of presence of their being and my being is there, and then the being of everything is there, and it just consumes into one sense of being that's just chef's kiss. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's so funny that you bring up this example of a cat because here in the campground as well, there's this very curious cat that's always in the van. I open the door slightly and suddenly she just slips in and just like is always wanting attention, and she has that very intense stare, you know. And yeah, I find that beautiful. In terms of people I've met,
Mac, he's digging up. He's digging up the the ground. Sorry.
that's all right. I feel like dogs are a very, very special expression of that as well sometimes, you
Yeah,
know?
they
Um,
are in that presence too. They're there,
they are.
and like they're not reflecting on anything. They just are sometimes.
Yeah, they just are. When it comes to people, I guess in that community there was a Baba as well, and he gave me like a session of
Oh
meditation.
wow.
And that was very special, where I could tell that he was tapped into something that I wasn't able to tap into yet, because he had a presence around him, especially during meditation, where you could feel that his experience kind of made my experience more intense, and he could kind of trigger that.
Wow.
So that I would say was the closest I had to some sort of a figure where I really felt that presence of God, you know.
Yeah. So is the cat or the Baba more for you when you see the cat?
That's tough. I'd say that's apples and oranges right there, you know. There's something about both. I think
Yeah.
the Baba really inspired me, because he also said that he used to be on this path of psychedelics and everything, you know, and then he kicked it and just became clean and just did meditation. And you could feel the amount of hours of experience that he has under his belt,
Wow.
just sitting cross-legged. And so I'd say it's different for
Yeah,
those
for sure.
reasons. And but I am also curious, because I think now, you know, we had kind of a sharing of the path that I had, the different ways. What was your path to God? What did that look like? Or I mean, I guess it's ever an
Yeah.
ongoing process, at
Yeah.
least in my opinion. I don't think you can ever truly, oh, I found him, now now I can stop looking. However,
Yeah.
what was that initiator for you, or that notification that this is the path?
Well, I think it's been a really long journey that probably started when I got into New Age spirituality, like in 2020, when I first, quote unquote, had my spiritual awakening. And I just started to like reading things. It wasn't like any specific experience where, I, meditated and I transcended my body and reached the infinite light of bliss. I was just reading like The Power of Now and Eckhart Tolle describing God as presence and as being, and that really resonated with me. And then I read I think it was the Kabbalion, and there just got into more sort of philosophical sort of ideas where God is, the all, and it said God is mind and the all is one mind, all that stuff. And I just started really reflecting more on what actually is God when we say that word, instead of what I typically would have done before I got into, I guess, New Age spirituality, where I mean, my family we're all Mexicans, and I think there's a very strong influence of Christianity and Catholicism in the Latin community. So we obviously, all my grandmas are like Jesus this, Jesus that, and my family really isn't like that. So from before, they weren't preachers of that, but we still kind of like when I lived in Mexico, I did go to like Sunday school, and but my mom was really open-minded. Like she always told me, whatever you believe in your heart, follow that. And she also told me, like she was open into like Buddhist sort of beliefs and all that. And so I think I started, but I don't know. It's like a sort of unconscious belief in God or spirituality when you're in that path where you just absorb what other people believe, like from your parents or your grandparents. You don't really reflect much on it. So like in high school, I had a cross, but I didn't pray to Jesus or anything like that. I didn't do any of that. And I never even thought about, what actually is God? Does God actually exist? I never reflected on any of that until I started intellectually like reading all these books, and it made me more curious. It made me really get into that sense of wonder about, what actually could God be? What even is reality? And how could the God or a creator take part in that? And it's been such a long journey trying to figure that out. But it started with New Age spirituality, and now it's been more looking at science and then philosophy and trying to understand the classifications of all of it, like kind of like I said, which it can get pretty dry and intellectual, but to me, it has really given me a deep sense of understanding about what God could actually be for me. And not just for me, but I think even objectively, like, what reasons do we have for believing God is this rather than that? But I think the most profound thing that I've stumbled upon in my journey towards understanding the nature of God and whether God exists is probably when I got really interested in mysticism, which is like the experiential side of religion, where, like, think of Moses, where he, in the passage of the burning bush, he described experiencing God as, some fire thing or whatever. It's like when people in religions, instead of trying to know God through reading something like I was doing before, reading the Kabbalion or reading the Power of Now, or even philosophy, like trying to argue and intellectually think about, oh, what could God be? And there's this view, and there's this view, and there's that view. The mystics take the path of experience, of trying to experience God in altered states of consciousness, or the divine or spiritual things in general. Could be through psychedelics, could be through meditation, any altered state. I would even put hypnosis in there, like the past life regression hypnosis things. I would classify that as a sort of mysticism. And I started like really researching that side of spirituality and God. And I found so many, so many connections that I've kind of talked about in some videos, because I studied pretty much in the mystical traditions of nearly all the religions. I haven't looked into some Gnostic ones, but like Hinduism with Advaita Vedanta, Christianity with the Christian mystics, Islam with like Sufism, and even some older ones called like Neoplatonism, which is like a Greek mysticism of a guy named Plotinus. And just like reading the primary text of those mystics and seeing what they describe when they supposedly experience God. And they often say it's like, oh, I mean, it's called the state of mystical union in the literature, because it's often described as like literally becoming one with the absolute or the all or God, and almost like a drop merging into an ocean, where it's usually described as going within yourself and then having an ego death, where it feels like you sort of die to yourself or you lose your sense of individuality. There's so much wind. Hope that doesn't sound at the microphone.
No, it doesn't. It's okay.
Okay. But you lose your sense of individuality or ego, like even the sense of being in your body. A lot of people in psychedelic experiences like ayahuasca even describe that, where they just get catapulted outside of their body. It's like you look around and, where the frick am I? I don't see my body. I don't even feel myself, my sense of self. But yet they're still in a state of being, a state of consciousness, which is very vast and profound. And they describe it as like a sort of very bright, intense light that feels very blissful and loving, because it almost feels like one with everything. Like you feel all things there at one with you. And that's what I saw it described very well in the past life regression sessions of Dolores Cannon, which she's a hypnotherapist that basically does therapy on people through hypnosis. But she started supposedly taking people to their past lives, allegedly through hypnosis. And, when people go to their past lives, they maybe describe living as some monk at some time, or as, whoever. But then people in her sessions started describing, instead of going to past lives, going to the source of reality itself, like to the very origin, and describing it as that light that is infinite and one with everything, and from which everything comes. And which also like, it's like full of information. Like it somehow is like learning and gathering knowledge, because I mean, this is another tangent, but even when people die supposedly and have near-death experiences, and then they come back, they sometimes describe going through a light and getting immersed in that light. That would be what the source would be, I guess. But Yeah, and the mystics describe it in their own way, in the words of their tradition. But yeah, I started finding that, and that really made me understand God in a completely new way than what I thought of before. Before, I was really into the whole idea that God really influenced from like the Hindus and the Advaita Vedanta, where God is pure consciousness and this awareness that's behind observing everything through all eyes. But then I started seeing that, you know, it could be much more complex, where there's this state of oneness at the origin of all things that could be what we typically think of as God.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm still figuring it out because I'm getting into science stuff now.
We all are, man.
Yeah. And there's one belief in pantheism called like seeing God as the one system and like the one system of the universe. And that's also something, but I mean, like it all connects. So yeah, it's never ending journey.
Would you
I'm
say you're
still,
closer now than you were in the beginning?
oh yeah, for sure. At least in understanding and knowledge. Experientially, I had one experience, which relates to that sense of being and presence, where I felt like a very deep sense of love. I didn't like transcend my body or anything, but I did feel like a deep sense of love and oneness with all things. But like here, which is sometimes called, I forget what it's called. There's a word for it in the mystical literature, but yeah, I definitely feel like in understanding so much more. Like before, I thought I didn't even have the concept of God apart from the word God and as something that creates and maybe connects to Jesus because I was influenced by Christian stuff. But yeah, for sure for me. What would you say for you? Do you have like a sort of view that you've come to, I guess, adopt through your journey of trying to understand God, or is it more like experiences and you're still trying to refine that and find that?
Oof, that's a good question. I would say for me, the God path has been more experiential, so through experiences. However, of course, there has been some rational thinking about who God is, because I think that's in general a good question. Like, who is God,
Yeah,
and what does he do? I guess
and if it
firstly,
exists.
yeah, I wanted to firstly say a point because I never heard of it before, and it kind of made sense. Before going on this trip, I talked to my grandpa, and he said that just casually on the side, because he studied a lot of art history. He said that in churches there are always these paintings of Jesus and the life of Jesus for those that were illiterate at the times, for they to still be able to understand the teachings of Jesus and the path of him. And I found that
Mhm.
fascinating because for some reason I never thought about that. I've been in churches so many times and I was like, yeah, okay, that's that picture of Jesus where he carries the cross and that's where he dies and that's where he's resurrected. I never thought that it makes complete sense that that's in a church, just from the perspective that maybe some people do not have the capabilities or
Yeah.
had at least the capabilities to really read and understand the story. Um, that being said, though, I think it's also taken a lot of twists and turns. Growing up in the north of Germany, which was Protestant Christianity, um, it was kind of more open. So my family was also very open towards, whatever you believe. I was confirmed a Protestant. However, I did it as
Mm.
most people with me, kind of more for the money than for the religious belief behind it. And that kind of was the case until, same as you, 2020, where I kind of became more spiritually aware through these discoveries I was making about our ancient past, and as well as just meditation, because I started meditating regularly. And I guess the concept of God has also really changed throughout the years. This pilgrimage I did in the spring really put me more closer to the teachings of Jesus and Christianity in itself and Maria, which was a very interesting journey because I think there's a lot of dogma in Christianity, of course. However, there's also a lot of hate towards the Christian church. And I think seeing that from an inside view is really interesting because I feel like a lot of times if people really criticize things, it's because they haven't really looked into it enough
Yeah.
or have gotten to understand it. So I think even Christianity, yeah, there's some very dark sides to it for sure. And I understand a lot of the criticism. However, it mostly comes from people that haven't really gotten in touch with it. And once you have, it's kind of exactly the same way. And I haven't really studied the Bible or anything like that, at least to the extent that I have other books. It is fascinating to me to have this idea that, humans naturally are sinners and there is one way to follow and that's how you get free, but he died for our sins, so there's nothing to worry about. I find that also a bit extreme, and also it
Yeah.
breeds sort of like a fear-based mindset somehow, or you're able to justify everything that you do because of that as well. So I
Yeah.
think there's
I
some
was I don't know if
there's some
you've seen.
yeah.
Sorry, it reminded me. I don't know if you've seen like a Family Guy episode, but there's a Family Guy episode where there's like they show Bin Laden getting raided by and caught, and then before he gets killed, he says, "Oh, uh, Jesus died for our sins, forgive me," and then he like gets into heaven.
Yeah,
So
fair.
like anything can be justified when, but that also gets into like what actually do you have to do as a Christian to get saved? You know, do you have to accept Jesus as your Lord or Savior and say that, or actually truly believe it internally? But yeah, keep going about the Protestant stuff. Sorry, I feel like I had to say that because yeah,
No,
and
I love
Christianity
it.
definitely is a very beautiful belief system. I think there's so much value in there and some beliefs in there for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as you mentioned before, all the sub branches as well carry so much wisdom. I mean,
Yeah.
Meister Eckhart, I mean, that is what a wise dude that was.
Yeah.
And he also went off the books a little bit, but he was too good off the books that they couldn't do anything to him.
What up, guys? If you found this podcast episode valuable, please rate it on Spotify so it gets out there to more people and it can increase the understanding of the world about what actually is God and, help us understand this big question. Give it a rating, share it with your friends, and maybe tell your friends what your beliefs are because we got to start talking about these controversial topics. And this podcast episode is one step to do that. So yeah, much love, guys. Please share.
I don't know. My understanding of God now is just truly, I guess I really started or resonated with the Hermetic principles and the
Mm.
teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, which I guess
That's
is
the
also more
Kabbalion.
okay, makes sense
Yeah,
then.
those
Um,
are the principles. Yeah.
it just goes into a lot of um this wisdom and idea that God is in absolutely everything, and that there are certain rules that principle or govern this existence. However, that those rules can be sometimes bent if it is the will of life. I think Aleister Crowley, controversial figure, especially in the circles of magic, but he said one sentence that I never forget, and it's his definition of magic. And he said, it's kind of funny if I forgot it now, but it's like magic is making change happen in accordance to the will. And he
Mm.
put a capital letter W there to define that it's the divine will. And I think when it comes to God and a divine purpose, or you do work for God or for something bigger than yourself, I think that's where true power and energy can also come from. And it has been a source of inspiration for me sometimes, although there are, of course, periods in life where that feels harder to kind of tap into than other times. However, that hermetic angle and the idea that there is a plan for us and that everything is kind of predetermined in our own way. It is up to us to make the right decisions and decisions that go according to the divine will. However, there is something that is there for us that we can trust. And whatever happens, there is a force and a reason for why that happens. And I think that has really been more my angle into this, not so much from a scientific point of view, rather through old stories, old mythology, teachings of Hermes, and kind of experiences in real life where I saw firsthand how these rules apply to my very own life, to then kind of see, okay, what of that is true for me at least, and what can I kind of discard or is not yet relevant to me.
Yeah, I love that. I think from what I've gathered from that, I think you have a lot of there's a belief in pantheism called like the one purpose pantheism, like a certain view of pantheism, which essentially says that there is just the one purpose for all things, and each part kind of contributes to that greater purpose in their own way. And there's a path that all things follow. But I mean, that can be interpreted in different ways. If there
The
is
Hindus have that for sure. The Hindus have it. But yeah, go off. Yeah.
It could be like, because you mentioned like the divine will, because it could be that apart from the one purpose, there's like a greater sort of agent, because obviously purposes usually come with the acts of intentional or intelligent agents, like with intentions. Like my purpose to, I guess, go over there and clean the poop on the ground is because I have that concept in my mind, and I can maneuver and intelligently like figure out how to get there. But I have the end goal in mind. My end goal is pick up that poop, put it in a bag, and then toss it out. But it's like, that's the end goal, but it's the end goal of like an agent with a mind. And it could be that the one purpose of the universe is there because of a bunch of individual agents. So like there's no one greater agent above all the little agents like you and me, like one greater divine will, but it's the will of each one of us that sort of creates one holistic sort of purpose. Or it could be the other way, where there actually is some divine will that ordains each of the individual wills of everyone else, or at least like put certain things in motion so they have their own individual purposes that also contribute to the greater purpose of the whole or the all.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting to me to think about which one of those could actually be the case. And
I do like that. It's a great way to kind of like separate it and also see that there's an individual purpose that leads to the bigger purpose. I would say in that though that the purpose is very momentarily. I like the example that you give of picking up the poop, you know.
that's not a shitty example.
Literally. Yeah, I love it though, because it's so meaningful, because for that very moment is that is your purpose. However, that changes from moment to moment. And I don't believe that there's this singular purpose that all of us have. I think it's multiple purposes that are spread out through different moments within our life. So that I think that we're meant to always change and transform and develop. And so with those changes come these new forms of purpose. And I think that is also something that I don't quite resonate with in this new age community, is this idea that, oh, find your purpose and you'll be happy. Because yes, however, that is similar as finding God. It's an everlasting journey. It's not like, oh yeah, I love to surf, and you're surfing your entire life and you found your purpose. It can be. However, I think for most people, it changes continually, of saying, okay, well, that was your purpose for that time frame. Now it's about letting that go and trying to see, okay, what is my task now in this world, and where can I go next and be of service?
Yeah, for sure. That resonates so much. I think that's definitely a more like fluid way to understand purpose. And it made me think about something you said before when we were talking about purpose in one podcast, and you said, like, what signs do you take to know if you're on the right path and like quote unquote following your purpose? And one of the things you said was like signs from the universe, like synchronicities. And it's almost like if we really are part of one sort of holistic system where each part is interrelated and each one has like goals that contribute to the greater whole. It does seem like the system itself, or maybe if it's something apart from the system, like some agent or whatever, it can like, it like speaks back to you and gives you feedback to let you know if you're contributing to the whole in the way that you're supposed to, or I guess in a way that does help out the whole, through sending those little synchronicities and stuff like that, where it does seem like, you know, every other part within this whole communicates that message to you, because you know that's what a synchronicity feels like, because it's not just coming spontaneously out of nowhere. It comes to you through other people, or through something you read on the internet, or through pieces of tarot cards or whatever. And there's parts of the universe that contribute to that message coming to you. So it is almost like the system itself is as a whole showing you that through the parts of that system, or the parts of that whole.
I love that.
Think about.
I love that. It's the same, and I guess the synchronicity when it comes to this podcast, which I found so funny too, and I sent you that video. When I was driving through Spain, there's a town called Merida, which is where you are in Mexico.
Yeah.
And exactly over that town was a rainbow. You couldn't make it up, you know? And I just drove past it, and I was just like, it's so bizarre. And I think the more aware one is able to be of these various signs that life sends you, the more we're able to kind of dance on that path that we set out for us to do. So I really, it's a beautiful way to put it. And to kind of circle it back also to God, because we want to keep these podcasts now, at least sometimes, very topic suggested. So this is also kind of a bit of a mid-roll, I guess. This episode is about God, if you haven't noticed. So I guess in that sense, if you were to personify God or try to explain who God is, right? Because there are different models, different belief systems. Just for yourself, who is God? Is it that man in the sky with the white beard, or who is he? You know, what type of sneakers does he like?
Like, for me, I would probably have to rephrase the question. Instead of saying who is God, saying what is God, because asking the question in that way often implies or tries to get at a sort of personal answer, that God is a sort of person, a who, instead of a what. But that's very complex. Like, I'd have to probably break down my whole belief system. But if I gave it a word, I would say I have a bunch of the pantheistic beliefs. Like, I think God is the one all that is the source of all, like that one infinite light state from which everything comes and to which everything returns, which is constantly growing in knowledge and understanding as like things come back to it after like beings die, usually how it's described in near-death experiences. But I think that like that source that's described as the light and energy and loving is also made out of like one energy, one creative sort of mindful, not mindful, but like that mindful in the sense that it has a mind and that it can think and create and do things. So I also have like the one substance pantheistic view, where I think literally that source, the energy from that literally goes out in like bits and flashes of energy to create this entire universe from the quantum level, which is usually described as like little quanta, little flashes of energy. I remember we talked about this in one podcast from the book, The Secret Oral Teachings of Tibetan Buddhist Sects, that one of the Buddhists there, and those Tibetan Buddhists, that specific school, through their mystical experiences, they describe that at the base level of reality, there's just flashes of energy constantly going like on and off. And, you know, they either said either it's that, or it's like some fluid like thing, which this is what I like, because I come to my beliefs through like philosophy, so like the viewpoints and reasons for believing it, but also science, which is why I tie into like quantum physics and all that stuff. but also mysticism. Like that book are the mystical experiences of a certain group of people that describe what reality could be like and what God could be like. So it's like these bits of flashes of energy that come from the source that exist at the quantum level, whether it be bits or fields, the quantum fields, that literally the base layer of everything in the universe is made out of. Like you obviously are made of like your organism, which is made of like all these subsystems within you, like the organ system, the skeletal system, all that stuff, and made of organs and cells, and then those cells made of molecules, and molecules are like atoms, but those atoms have the subatomic particles, which are made of like whatever that stuff is that they're made of, like the electron. We call it an electron, and we say it has certain properties like electric charge or whatever. And but like what actually is that electron made out of? Like what's the intrinsic nature of the stuff, the substance of that? And I think that is what would be like the substance of God coming from the source, like an inherently creative sort of energy that like comes together to create like these atoms and these other things, like kind of like structures into greater and greater wholes. But this is so complex to try to explain, because like I have like all the pantheistic views almost like into one, because the view that God is the whole system, which has parts which are interrelated and which come together, and each part has like their own individual goals, but the whole system also has like one larger level goal. That also is like part of my pantheistic view, because I think the universe is like that, and the universe itself is like almost like our body, I think, where we have these subsystems within us, like organs and cells, that contribute to this larger system, which is our human body, which has specific functions like allowing us to walk and to do all that stuff and to, poop and pee, but to allow. And if you look at the universe at like larger scales, we literally call the system of the planet, the solar system. That is a system itself which has a sun and everything revolves around that. And it's almost like it has like a set path. And if you go even one step further, there's the galaxy, which is its own sort of system with stars. And then one step above that, it's like galaxy superclusters. And we're part of a massive galaxy supercluster called Laniakea. If you look it up, I think it means the immeasurable heaven. But if you look it up, it literally looks like
title.
Yeah. Laniakea. It looks like a magnet. It's so crazy. It looks like the heart. If you look up like a picture of it, maybe we can put it up on the podcast, but our galaxy supercluster with another one looks like an apple almost, or like something like this, where it's like one cluster here, and there's like a force kind of pulling everything to the center. And that itself is one bigger system. And it like just keeps going, because all the galaxy superclusters create like the cosmic web of the universe, which when we look at it like in science, scientific evidence shows that it's very similar to the network of our brain, like our brain system, which a bunch of neurons are connected. So it's like, I think everything is like that sort of holistic system with subsystems within it. And that also is God. But also at the core, at the bottom of that, everything is made out of that one quantum energy stuff that also comes from the source of all things, which is also God. So it's like the God is the one, all. God is the all that is one, because it's the substance out of which everything is made, the quantum stuff. But God is also the all that is one, because it's the source from which everything comes. But God is also the all that is one, because it's like the one holistic system made of many subsystems, like you and me and this planet and the solar system and then the galaxies and everything, which are just larger and larger subsystems. But even like the force idea, that they see it as like a sort of guiding force that informs or structures or orders things, kind of like the Force in Star Wars, which, you know, like Obi-Wan said, the Force is one energy field, quote unquote, created by all living things that binds us and surrounds us and penetrates us. So it is everywhere. And it says it binds the galaxy together, kind of like gravity almost. So like it also has like an inherent sort of power. But I think the ones I definitely resonate the most with are the first three. God as the source, as the one source, as the one substance or being or energy of everything out of which everything is made, and as the one system, holistic system.
Okay.
So that's kind of my views right now. They've really changed a lot, and I think that system, like I said, is also like it has a mind. It's agential, so it's like you could even say could be like a one mind, but I'm not sure.
What I think is a great comparison to that, because that really came to me when you were saying this, is kind of how the mycelium works, or even the human mind, which is the same pattern anyways, right? However, it's kind of that, you know, how trees in a forest communicate with each other and give each other nutrients through the mycelium. And it's if there's a bigger signal that tells the surrounding trees and environment, hey, I need nutrients. So he asks and he receives, kind of like to go into the Bible in a way. It kind of provides that same systematic guidance that we humans sometimes feel, even on a biochemical level in the forest, which I think is a great point to also add to your idea of the God as the systems, because it is that greater part that still, I mean, all three things you've said really, because I think it lends into the same idea, just explained on a different level or different aspect to it. Yeah, because it's really beautifully put, because I think there is something that is just the generator of this substance, you know, that is just pervading into everything, the prana, the life force energy, the chi, whatever you want to call it. And I find that fascinating. It's how you said as well, with the patterns that keep being the same thing, how we see the same pattern in a leaf, in a river, and in the human blood cells. They are the same if you look at that from the similar distance. And
fractals.
Exactly. And I think if you go to the universe, it's the same thing, you know. Maybe we just can't zoom out far enough to even see some of the other patterns that exist. However, I have no doubt that they're there, because you can study the macro and the micro, and vice versa. And I think that is just detrimental to this whole thing, to kind of look at this and say, okay, what can we observe? And it is interesting to reach this time now, which is kind of like a Renaissance and Age of Enlightenment 2.0, where we as humans are starting to realize that there is just so much to give into the intelligent design of Earth. And even, I think, one of the most scientific experiments there are, which is the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, there is this idea and search for the God particle, which I find so fascinating, to kind of find the very particle that is kind of the cause for this universe. And
I forget I think that's called the Higgs boson now. Higgs.
Okay.
I think that's the particle that supposedly gives mass to objects, which is very important. I forget. I think, I don't think they should have called it the God particle, but because it's not like it's the one particle that, you know, ordains all other particles. It just has a very important purpose to play in terms of this entire universe. Like without it, objects wouldn't have mass and shit would go to shit.
So yeah, or shit wouldn't be shit.
Or shit wouldn't be shit, yeah. That's why I think like every little thing has like a specific part to play. Like even if you look at the laws of nature and the forces like gravity, electromagnetism, and all that, they're created from particles and the interactions between them. But like each one of them is so important. Like without that, you know, we would fly off into space or whatever. Things would just go to go to
Yeah.
shit pretty much. And
Yeah, take a liver
yeah,
out of a human, see what he does, you know? It's
yeah,
you need
exactly.
all the small parts. It's,
The subsystems.
exactly, remove ants from the ecosystem and watch what would happen, you know? I think we often talk about,
Yeah.
oh, it's gone, we'd be screwed. And yeah, we would be, but there are so many other things that could also just leave that would really change the way that the world functions today. I remember there was something I read about when America was settled. There were these people who, somewhere in Montana, they killed all the wolves because they were a threat to the humans. And then they had such an overpopulation of the deer that the deer started to eat all the grass, which made the forest die. So they realized, oh,
Yep.
damn, we need the predators to take out some of the deer so that the forest
Yeah.
survives. And that's so fascinating and goes to show how this design is so intelligent and everything is so thought out, you know, that even when a species goes extinct, it is because, you know, kind of goes to the same reason of if we talk about purpose, because the purpose for that being is not really there in regards to other purposes that are now expanding, which is also, I guess, a smart way to look at evolution too, or I guess a different way to look at evolution, not a smart
Yeah,
way, I don't want
different
to say that.
interpretation.
Different. I mean, I'm not gonna say
Yeah.
that I'm smarter than Darwin. I just wanted to say that I think it is also an interesting view to look at evolution in terms of purpose and if
Yeah,
it's
for
needed
sure, dude.
in the big spectrum of things.
Yeah, I love when you said that when we were talking about evolution in the other podcast, because like when there's a need, that's when things come into being and like exist. Like obviously, maybe there's mutations that play into it, but the things that get, and maybe even mutations are just like creative stuff from the DNA, which is like when you get ideas and you're just trying a bunch of things, and that is the mutation stuff. But where
Yeah,
things really come because there's a need for that in the system, and they leave when there's not a need for that in the system or something like that. And
yeah,
it really, I mean, like the whole idea of the web of life with the interconnections, that is in a word the system of the planet, just the system of planet Earth, Gaia. That's the system made out of the living organisms like plants, animals, even bacteria, but also the environment like rivers and mountains and all that. That just forms part of one giant being or one giant living system. You could say call it a being, but it's just one giant living system that we can call Gaia or whatever. And it really even brings you back to, you know, those beliefs of like the Native Americans or like the Aztecs or the Mayans, of like indigenous peoples that really cherish the earth as a sort of deity, you know, Pachamama, or they really saw it as something that provided for them and that they had to contribute to and that they were an integral part of. And yeah, even if I think there really is a lot of evidence that earth is a sort of living, interconnected, holistic system, but I think there's a sense in which being grateful to it and understanding that and making sure you're contributing to the system and helping out your surrounding environment is so important as well, which is like very religious, like saying thanks Mother Earth, or you know, walking with just more mindful steps is very religious, and it goes back to the, you know, all those native and indigenous beliefs. But I think it is really grounded in science now. And this
yeah,
would be, I guess, a form of pantheism where God is just that specific system of Mother Earth. But I obviously, my version of pantheism is more like all encompassing. It's just all systems everywhere. I think even the source might be a system itself. Like the energy there, when it goes to create things, it does it, Jesus, Max, according to specific purposes and stuff. But yeah, it's crazy.
and Max has a different purpose right now.
it's so cool too, because like it always fills me with so much wonder, understanding like how, you know, that dog is its own little system, and like it has like a digestive system that allows it to poop. It has that function, that purpose. Another system that allows it to breathe and eat and do all that stuff, and to just, and then all together, all the systems form part of Max, the dog.
Yeah,
That's just in the way
dog,
that he is.
God
That a dog.
backwards.
Yep, there it is. Hey, that's in pantheism. He technically would be, I guess, a part of God, a part of the system. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
find that
just
so.
fills me with so much wonder.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think everything kind of does. It's if we look into all of those indigenous tribes, that is that wonder, that conscious curiosity, if you want to roll credits, that is there for all the humans and kind of has been. I find that so fascinating if we look at no matter where in the world, there is that belief of something higher. And I find that in itself also not a coincidence that no matter where we look, there is a connection to this planet, to a higher sense of being, of community, of elders, of wisdom, there have been certain truth that have always kind of pierced through the human layer that have made this so universal no matter where you are. And I find that so inspirational in a way too, to kind of pursue this path or look at that and not fall into, I guess, this aspect of God is dead. And I guess I think that's a good way to kind of also go into the step of like, okay, the beginning of how we found God or who God is, to now I guess the question of, is God dead, the famous Nietzsche quote, or to say that
Yeah,
like, if from just a perspective of an atheist, like, what is there to that theory that gives power to that in your perspective? Do you have an opinion on that?
yeah. I often think in atheism, I don't think I think people that are typically atheist, when they ask the question about what is God and whether God exists, they close themselves off into sort of binary opposition. Like I forget what it's called, when there's like only two possible options that you give yourself as the answer to the question, and
Hmm.
you limit yourself, and that's like really, it's a fallacy in philosophy, because usually atheists, when they argue against theists or in general in podcasts or in interviews, they always uh, pose the debate about God as the debate between atheism and theism. God as this, the God of the Bible, the God of, as this one being that's transcendent, that also plays part in the universe, but it has like has very specific attributes. Like I said, all knowing, all powerful, sometimes all good, sometimes it like judges, and it's like it can punish and reward, and it's very personal. It like takes part in the lives of the history of human beings. So I think atheists, when they usually argue in that way, they stick themselves into that narrow two. There's only two answers to this question, and they don't even consider like pantheism, like the whole idea that God could be the source of all things, or the system, the holistic system of the universe. That's, I don't think I've heard any atheist ever consider that. But I think there's good reasons that the atheists give in objection to the view of like theism, like the
Hmm.
so-called problem of evil. Like if God is perfectly good and all powerful and all that stuff, then why is there evil in the world? If he could, I forget what the quote is, but it's such a good quote from Heraclitus, God, problem of evil.
It
I'll look
does
it up.
make a lot of sense, though. Like,
Like,
it is
oh
a very
yeah, I'll
good
say it.
question to pose.
Yeah, it says, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Where comes evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? So that's like I think a good
Bars.
representation. Mars. Yep. Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, honestly.
But I feel like that's a good representation of the argument against theism, at least one of the core arguments. And that's really what a lot of atheists do. Like if you look at Alex O'Connor, very famous atheist, like Sam Harris, I don't know, Richard Dawkins, they're trying to argue against the traditional view of theism. They're not arguing against pantheism or panentheism or any of those other views. So I think there's good. I mean, I actually agree with a lot of the stuff atheism says because I'm not a theist, and I think there's reasons to not believe in theism or against that view. So that's kind of my take right now.
Yeah, I get that. I think it is really, it makes sense that a lot of people have this opinion, because I think, especially in our generation, theism in itself is just not nearly as popular as it once was. If I think about my high school class, right, I could maybe tell you one person that was kind of a believer, but even not that I would be sure of it. You know what I mean? So I would say when it comes to just monotheistic views of, okay, I believe in the Bible, of like pure Christians, in the high school class, there was not really anyone. And now in later stages, there are some people that I've met that are our age and monotheistic and believe in a theism in a way. However, it is, I think, also a matter of times with science becoming more and more advanced, and this whole idea of, oh, you know, we're so enlightened, how can you still believe in this ancient idea, that there is, in my opinion, also sometimes sort of an arrogance around it, in that question, where it comes from a standpoint of, oh, we know everything, so we would know that, when in reality, I don't think we know anything. And so I at the same time, I understand that worldview in the world that we live in, you know, because I think if you focus on all the negative things, then you get very well to that argument that you just said of Heraclitus as well, where, okay, well, why are there wars? Why are there wars going on if there is, you know, this all-powerful good God in the sky that protects us all and loves us, and love is its ultimate form? So it is a very interesting point to make. And for me, at least, I would say atheism is a fun way to kind of look at it sometimes. However, it is inherently more valuable to a person to believe in something higher rather than not. I forgot who said it, but there was this whole experiment as well on how it was kind of more or less proven in sample groups how religion, or the belief of something higher, makes a society survive in the first place, and that it wouldn't be possible for a society to really strive without it, or it would just completely go into chaos, because there wouldn't be an order that is kind of maintained through something higher.
I've never seen that, but that'd be so cool to look into.
There was something like that.
I'm sure atheists would probably take that and like use it against God or theism or whatever views, because you could say, like, with evolution, you know, we're here because of the adaptations we have that allowed us to survive, and the only reason that beliefs in God or spirituality are here is because they allow us to survive, and they've been picked by evolution. But that's, I'm just, I guess, stating that because I honestly think I've heard atheists say that.
That's a good atheistic argument for that same thing, I guess. And I guess that's what it comes to show, is that there is so many different versions of truth, you know? And I also wanted to say, which I found pretty hilarious, is for the viewers, because Google Meet always records the person talking. I was also like, I want to keep talking until Bruno is back into his place, because you were just walking from the living room to your place. So for the viewers, you probably just teleported. I just went off on a section of like, oh yeah, man, atheism, and suddenly Bruno teleported. Deal with that, atheists. Tell me, how did he do it? You can't. Is it evolution? Give it to me. Natural selection? I don't know.
So
I doubt it.
there, mic drop.
Yeah. Atheists have been real silent since Bruno teleported to his room.
Holy shit! We gotta make an argument like that.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, it's so hard too, because like you said, I mean, in philosophy, there's arguments that you can make for any position, and a lot of them have like pretty good reasons and logic. And like, to what point do you say this argument's pretty sound, and so therefore, you know, God doesn't exist? I don't think you can actually do that. I think arguments in philosophy usually just make something either more or less probable, or so it's not like a definitive conclusion, because like the argument I just made, because like the statistic you showed where belief in God helps humanity and society survive, and because evolution is sort of works in a way that the traits that allow us to survive are the things that stick in time. Because of that, therefore, it's less likely that there is an actual God. That's an argument, but it can't really say like, therefore, there is no God. It's not like a strong conclusion like that, definitive. It's always like, therefore, it is more probable that there is no God, or that there is a God. Like, because there's arguments for obviously theism and pantheism as well, like design arguments that say, oh, because the universe is designed in this way, or it's fine-tuned, therefore it's more probable that there is a God. So it's always so hard, because it's like you're inching towards the truth, but you're never really getting there definitively, because there are always probabilities. And even though those can probably, I guess, get close to, at least to you, they give you good reasons and good evidence for believing in something. There's so many other counter reasons as well, which is hard. That's probably why a lot of people are agnostics, where they don't believe in God, or don't, or believe, or don't. Yeah, they're just neither theism nor atheism nor any of it. They're just like, oh, I don't really know.
Yeah,
Who knows?
gosh, pick a team. No, I mean, I get it though, I do get that view.
Yeah, no, they're not invited to the party until they pick a side.
Yeah,
Nah,
I feel like
I'm kidding. But yeah, there's something to it for sure.
yeah, there's something to it. A lot of love to agnostic people, but I damn well know if you'd ask agnostic people like, "Oh, what are we gonna eat today?" They're those dudes that are just gonna hit you with that. I don't know what we want to eat today. This is like the real indecisive dudes.
Yeah, they really analyze all the options, and they're like, "Oh, well, this one's pretty good. Oh, that one's pretty good too. Oh, fuck. I guess I'll just I don't know. I won't get anything for dinner."
Yeah, if they get an ice cream, they get 2 bowls of ice, like two scoops of ice cream, 1 vanilla, 1 chocolate, always the same. No deviation, just those two, opposite spectrum. And I don't know, have maybe tried strawberry ones.
Yeah, I feel like that's the atheists that say it's either chocolate or vanilla.
Okay,
and because chocolate is ass, and all the reasons are bad, therefore vanilla, which I guess would be atheism. They don't say, oh, but there's actually strawberry, and there's mint chocolate, and there's all this other stuff that they don't even consider.
Yeah, but and Gnostics just eat the waffle. They don't care. they just get to the core of it.
Gnosticism is so like nuanced too. I was just talking with someone on Instagram. They were trying to tell me a specific Gnostic like sect and their beliefs, and it's so complex because they have the whole idea of the demiurge of like, oh yeah, there is one transcendent God that that is a creator, but actually that creator has like it like didn't actually create the universe. There's some other evil being that I guess spawned out of the creator or something like that, like the demiurge that actually created the material world, but it wasn't actually God. It is the demiurge. So I guess that would be a response to the problem of evil as well. Well, yeah, it's because God didn't create it, and the demiurge did. So
Yeah,
they got it solved.
yeah. Take that. And also, I
Take
think
that.
they believe that there is a limited amount of souls. I
Mm.
think in Gnosticism, where the soul tree kind of only gives out so much, so there are a lot of humans that are
Well,
basically soulless, which I also think is a very crazy belief. Um, I don't know. On that ice cream thing, I'd say the Hindu religion just eats the store. They just eat everything. They just they eat the
yeah,
chairs, the furniture, the walls, whatever. They
honestly, they probably were the store that created the ice creams
yeah.
because they're so old and they have like go back. I mean, that's probably very controversial, but they're very old and they started with like polytheism, but they also had like the monotheism with the Brahman thing. So they got all the flavors, and then probably some religions like were inspired by them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, the Vedas is some of the most oldest books and material
Yeah,
that we have written.
yeah,
That is
even
also really
philosophical.
not discovered enough in the West. I think there have been some people like
Yeah,
Alan Watts, obviously, that has brought those Eastern religions more to the West. I love that dude.
yeah.
Um,
That's my fucking adopted grandpa, man.
yeah, yeah,
He's
for
like
real, for
the
real.
wise grandfather teaching everyone.
Yeah, yeah. What a man and what a voice, especially on those 1970 radio recordings. Ooh,
Yeah,
there's something about that mic, that is just
yeah.
so ass in a good way. I don't know.
And his hearty laugh. I
Yeah.
just yeah, he's great. I feel like yeah, he brought so many. I think I was influenced the most by him and my also God beliefs. I forgot to mention that,
Mhm.
like Hinduism and even pantheism. I think he brought that, and even the system stuff, because he kind of said that everything is interrelated and connected and part of the web of life as well. Because he was taking from Buddhism and their whole idea that connects to that.
Mhm. I
Yeah, he's
think
very influential.
there are so many people in that regard that could also be considered, to get back to an earlier question of who the presence has that you really feel God in. There's some moments of voice where if Alan Watts speaks about something that really resonates, there is a moment where you really see that enlightenment thought and idea coming out of that mind and
Yeah,
in that form of his voice. And I think that happens with a lot of different characters. I mean, you mentioned Eckhart Tolle or Meister Eckhart even.
the
There's so,
reincarnation of Meister Eckhart.
yes, the reincarnation. So I think there's so many great things to say about that. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's been an hour and a half. If we want to keep them one topic, just as a quick thing, do we
Yeah,
keep them also like a bit more concise?
I
Um,
think. Yeah, I think so far this is pretty good. I mean, I think next time we could prepare and do more stuff, and we could keep this also as well in the podcast so you guys are hearing for our next ideas. Because I was when you mentioned Christianity and then you mentioned like the sins and all that stuff and resurrection. I thought that would honestly be a very good rabbit hole to go down as well. To go
yeah.
down, we could even focus like a whole podcast on just Christianity podcast episode and like the main beliefs because that's something I'm really fascinated by and not just like critically analyzing the beliefs but also like taking value from the core ones like about forgiveness and loving your brother as yourself and all that good
Mhm.
stuff but also really critically analyzing like the resurrection and the whole idea that Jesus is God incarnate, all that stuff we could look at in other podcast
Yeah.
episodes as well.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and I think it would also be great to hear some feedback from you. There's a great podcast that I can only really recommend. It's Know Thyself, hosted by Eduardo and Daniel, and they haven't posted in some time now. However, what they did was also they had series going on. So they would, let's say they had the 12 zodiacs, right? And then they would
Mhm.
make an episode on each zodiac as an example, right? Where it's like you have a series, you can go really deep into all of these subsystems and talk about the big system. And I think that would also give a lot of inspiration to this podcast as well, where we're like, oh, okay, let's, in 2 weeks, we'll talk about Gnosticism. And then we both kind of go into that rabbit hole, research it a little bit, and then come out and make an episode about that, for example. Even though I think that's such a nuanced topic that would take some more time to research.
Yeah. Life.
um, However, I think something like that could also be really cool, and also an
That'd be cool.
inspiration to dive even deeper and ask questions about these things and really nitpick into the details of these things.
Yeah, I mean, this could be our series on like religion and God and spirituality, maybe. And
Yeah,
we started with like the big overarching question: what is God, or who is God? If I guess you're a theist or believe in like a personifications of God, like
Mhm.
Jesus and stuff. And then that's like the broadest question in the system of the religion stuff. But then we can go more specific to specific traditions instead
Yeah,
of general ideas across traditions, like the idea of God.
yeah. I like that. I like that. There are many ways to do this. We're also just going to talk off the screen about this and make this crisp. However, if you have any suggestions, your views on God would also be very interesting. How did you find to it? Are you an atheist? What would you eat in the ice cream shop of religions? Very good question. And yeah, with that being said, we'd love to hear your recommendations. And we'll catch you in the next one when we talk about, you'll see what we talk about. Maybe you know already, maybe you don't. We'll see.
Much love, guys.